For 38 days, the sky over the Persian Gulf stayed lit, not by stars, but by the amber trail of falling missiles. And while the world watched the tracers in the air, most people missed the real kill shot happening at sea level. Most people miss this. The single most powerful weapon in modern geopolitics isn't a nuclear warhead, it's a 21-mile-wide geological accident called the Strait of Hormuz. Right now, as you watch this, 20% of the entire world's energy is being squeezed through a corridor so narrow that every ship has no choice but to brush against the territorial waters of the world's most volatile powers. One wrong move here, and the lights in Tokyo, Manila, New York, and Lagos don't just flicker, they go out. But here's where it gets interesting. The real danger isn't a bomb, it's a system. And that system has a playbook. On the bridge of the metal-gray Northern Star, Captain Mateo Reyes, a veteran mariner from Cebu who has crossed the strait more than 60 times, is gripping the railing with white knuckles. He isn't watching the radar for storms, he's watching for inspections. His second officer, Lieutenant James Calloway from Houston, Texas, stands silently beside him, eyes locked on the AIS transponder. Just hours before, news broke that a third vessel had been fired upon while waiting to transit into the Gulf of Oman. The shipping lanes here are a mere 3 kilometers wide, that's barely wider than a highway interchange. Mateo knows that if this passage closes, even for 48 hours, oil prices don't just rise, they spike past $100 a barrel instantly, snapping supply chains from Rotterdam to Manila like dry wood. This is the key artery, and today it's pulsing with fear. To understand why the entire world is held hostage by 21 miles of water, you have to look down, millions of years down. This is not a man-made vulnerability. It is a geological sentence written by tectonic forces. When the Arabian Plate crashed into Eurasia, it didn't just build the Zagros Mountains of Iran, it also created a massive structural bowl that filled with seawater, the Persian Gulf. But here's the part that sounds almost too convenient to be real. Those same tectonic forces also trapped one of the largest concentrations of petroleum on the planet, directly behind a single, impossibly narrow exit. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, UAE, Qatar, all of their oil, all of their gas, all of it has only one door. Geography in this case didn't just shape a landscape, it wrote a geopolitical destiny that no army, no treaty, and no technology has been able to rewrite since. For decades, Washington analysts like Dr. James Miller believed that a blockade meant closing the gate, sinking ships, mining channels, forcing a full shutdown. They modeled it, they wargamed it, they were wrong. What the world is witnessing now is something far more sophisticated and far harder to fight. The Hormuz Playbook is not a closure, it's a filter. Instead of slamming the door shut, Iran has quietly transformed the strait into a selective toll booth, a checkpoint where some ships pass freely, others pay millions in unofficial transit fees, and still others simply disappear into legal ambiguity. Dr. Miller, who spent 18 years at the Pentagon's Strategic Studies Division, told his own team behind closed doors, "We built models for a war. They built a system. That system is the most powerful economic weapon in the modern world, and it doesn't require a single missile to be fired." Most people see Hormuz as a dry military outpost on a map, a dot of geopolitical tension with no soul. Step onto Hormuz Island and the world turns surreal. This is a place where mountains of salt erupt from the earth in colors that make no logical sense. Amber oxide red, sulfuric yellow, deep violet, and chalk white, all compressed into formations that look more like a planetary surface than a Persian coastline. Red clay canyons collapse directly into the turquoise Gulf. The local people, the Bandari, whose ancestors fished these waters before Rome was a city, have built a civilization on top of this geological madness. They eat the earth itself. They mix the iron-rich red clay called galak into their flatbread, mineral nutrition extracted from the land when the sea gives nothing else. This isn't mythology. This is a community that turned a hostile planet into a pantry. This is the question that stops most military analysts cold. Why doesn't the world's most powerful navy simply force the strait open? The answer is geography, and it is humiliating. In the congested, narrow channels of the strait, size is a liability, not an asset. You don't need a fleet of destroyers to create chaos here. You need disruption. Iran's strategy relies on fast attack boats, nimble, low-profile vessels that can appear and vanish within minutes, combined with shore-based anti-ship missile systems buried into the cave-riddled coastline and sea mines that cost $2,000 each but can stop a billion-dollar tanker cold. Dr. Miller's deputy, Commander Sofia Reyes, no relation to Captain Mateo, published a classified paper that leaked in 2024. The asymmetric cost-exchange ratio in the strait is approximately 1 to 4,000. A disruption that costs Iran $1 million costs the global economy $4 billion. You don't need to win a war here. You only need to make the water feel unsafe. The moment insurance rates spike, shipping stops. But here's the part of the Hormuz story that almost nobody covers, and it may be the most important of all. Beneath those tanker hulls, beneath 96-degree Fahrenheit water that would bleach and kill coral reefs anywhere else on Earth, something extraordinary is happening. The coral reefs of the Persian Gulf don't just survive extreme heat, they have evolved to thrive in it, over thousands of years of biological pressure that the rest of the ocean has never experienced. Marine biologist Dr. Angela Santos, a Filipino researcher from De La Salle University in Manila who has been studying these reefs for 9 years, calls them the ocean's first draft of the future. The adaptations encoded in these corals, the heat shock proteins, the symbiotic algae mutations, represent the only known biological blueprint for ocean survival in a warming world. If we lose this corridor to oil contamination, we don't just lose a trade route, we lose the instruction manual for saving every reef on the planet. On the shore of Keshma Island, the largest island in the Persian Gulf, just kilometers from the main shipping lane, there's a forest that solved a problem that stumped botanists for centuries. The Hara mangrove forest covers 30 square miles of dense, salt-filtering woodland that grows in seawater lethal to virtually every other plant species on Earth. These trees extract salt through their roots and expel it as visible white crystals on their leaves, a biological desalination process that has no synthetic equivalent. For the fishing families of Keshma, this isn't a wilderness to be protected from a distance. It's a nursery, the spawning ground of the Gulf's fish stocks, the storm buffer for their villages, the carbon sink for their coastline. But today, the wake turbulence from tanker traffic and oil microcontamination is silently suffocating root systems that took centuries to establish. The same corridor that feeds the world's economy is slowly starving the system that feeds the people who live inside it. In the ancient port village of Laft on Keshma Island, summer temperatures reach 122 degrees Fahrenheit, the kind of heat that makes you feel like you're breathing through a wet towel wrapped around a furnace. Most modern assumptions say the only answer to heat this extreme is electricity, refrigeration, and mechanical cooling. The people of Laft solved this problem approximately 1,000 years before electricity existed. The Bodgir, the Persian wind tower, is a mud brick chimney system built with precise directional openings that catch prevailing Gulf winds from any angle and funnel them down through a shaft into the living spaces below. No moving parts, no power consumption. Interior temperatures drop by up to 20 degrees Celsius. Engineer Marcus Delgado, a Filipino-American from Sacramento who spent 3 years studying vernacular cooling systems for a DARPA climate resilience contract, called the Bodgir the most thermodynamically efficient passive cooling architecture ever developed by any civilization anywhere. The West is only now beginning to understand what Laft knew a millennium ago. Survival here is not improvised, it is calculated. In Laft, there are exactly 366 ancient hand-dug wells, one for every day of the year, including the leap year day, distributed across the settlement in a precise rotation system. Each well is used in sequence, one per day, allowing water tables in each shaft to recover before they are drawn from again. This is not folk wisdom or romantic ingenuity. This is systems engineering developed under centuries of existential pressure, tested and refined across generations where failure meant dying of thirst within sight of the ocean. When the world's diplomats argue about the stability of the Strait of Hormuz, they are almost always talking about oil contracts, naval postures, and treaty clauses. They are almost never talking about the people on the shore, people who have been managing irreplaceable scarcity with surgical precision since long before the first oil rig was ever built. The Strait has always been a survival system. Oil just gave it a bigger audience.
In the boatyards of Keshm, something is being built that cannot be taught in any university on Earth. The Leng, a traditional wooden sailing vessel designed specifically for the Persian Gulf's depth profiles, wind patterns, and tidal rhythms, is constructed without a single drawing, blueprint, or digital schematic. The master builders, most of them in their 60s and 70s, carry the entire design, the precise curve of every rib, the calculated rake of the keel, the dimensional ratios of the hull, entirely inside what researchers describe as accumulated spatial memory. It is an embodied engineering knowledge system, refined across generations and recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. One of the apprentices learning the craft is 23-year-old Andres Cruz from Batangas, Philippines, the son of a fisherman who came to Keshm on a work visa and found himself drawn into the boatyard every afternoon. "My father built boats in Batangas. They didn't use drawings either. Some things translate across every ocean." You have almost certainly seen the image before and gotten it completely wrong. The borge, the ornate, rigid face mask worn by Bandari women across the islands of the Persian Gulf, has been photographed, captioned, and misidentified by every Western travel magazine that has ever run a feature on the region. It is not ceremonial. It is not a symbol of restriction. It is environmental technology, engineered over generations for one of the harshest UV environments on Earth. Open salt water reflecting equatorial sun at sea level for 12 hours a day, every day of the year. The borge's rigid brim deflects direct radiation. Its inner surface creates a microclimate of shade that protects the skin from damage that no sunblock could prevent. But it is also a text. The specific color combinations, embroidery patterns, and structural proportions of a woman's borge communicate her family lineage, marital status, and community affiliation, readable to anyone from the same islands at a glance. It is a language worn on the face in a place where the sun burns away every other form of shadow. In the village of Kumzar, perched on a cliff at the northernmost point of the Musandam Peninsula, accessible only by boat, carved into rock so steep that no road has ever been built to reach it, the people speak a language that exists nowhere else on Earth. Kumzari is a linguistic fossil record. Linguists classify it as a unique linguistic isolate, a living archive of every civilization that ever passed through the strait. Persian traders, Arab merchants, Portuguese colonizers, Indian dhow captains, and British naval officers. Their words layered into the local tongue across 4 centuries and then froze in place, preserved by the cliffs and the isolation of the sea, while every other dialect along the coast modernized and standardized around them. But connectivity is dissolving now what centuries of war and conquest couldn't touch. Young people in Kumzar speak Arabic on their phones, English on their apps. Linguist Dr. Patricia Ignacio, a Filipino language researcher from the University of the Philippines, estimates that Kumzari will fall silent within a generation. The strait didn't just trade oil through here, it traded entire civilizations, and the receipt is still being spoken for now. Back aboard the MV Northern Star, the playbook stops being theory. A radio call comes in. Not a command to halt, not a military challenge frequency, but a polite request for vessel verification. Captain Mateo Reyes has been through this exact script 6 times. He knows what comes next. James Calloway pulls up the AIS data on the secondary screen without being asked. 3 vessels currently transiting ahead of them, 2 with Chinese flag registrations, 1 Indian-flagged one, are passing through without delay, their paths clean and unobstructed. The Northern Star flies a Liberian flag, but is owned by a Zurich-based holding company with deep American equity ties. Mateo picks up the handset. He's not going to win an argument about international law at sea level. He's going to negotiate. This is selective passage, a world where access doesn't depend on the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, but on your country's current bilateral position with Tehran. The rules of the sea are being rewritten in real time, one radio call at a time. Here is the part that sounds simple, but almost nobody does the actual work to verify it. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, is the foundational legal architecture supposed to guarantee every nation's vessels the right of free transit through international straits. It is the document that Iran invokes when justifying its claims. It is the document that the U.S. Navy cites when conducting freedom of navigation operations. Here's the problem. Iran signed UNCLOS in 1982, but has never ratified it, meaning under international law, it is not legally bound by its provisions. The United States signed UNCLOS in 1994 and has never ratified it either. Both superpowers are invoking a law they don't fully belong to, in a waterway where neither side has clean legal standing, policed by a naval force operating under ambiguous mandate. What fills that legal vacuum isn't law, it's power. And as Dr. Miller told his team in that war room, power without legitimacy is just leverage, and leverage always finds a new buyer.
When the strait slows down, the world doesn't wait politely for it to reopen. In South Korea, the government shortened the national working week by 4 hours to reduce electricity consumption. In Japan, rolling blackouts were introduced in 14 prefectures for the first time since the Fukushima crisis. In the Philippines, fuel rationing cut motorcycle and tricycle operations, the primary transportation system for 40 million daily commuters, by 30%. In Germany, industrial manufacturers began halting overnight production shifts to reduce natural gas burn. These aren't the consequences of a war. They are the consequences of ambiguity, of shipping insurance rates rising, of captains slowing down out of caution, of charterers rerouting through the Cape of Good Hope and adding 16 days to every voyage. The Strait of Hormuz is not a pipeline, it is a pressure valve. And when it even partially closes, you don't just feel it at the gas pump, you feel it in every system that modern civilization runs on. And those systems are more fragile than anyone in power wants to publicly admit.
The moment of peak tension was at 10 a.m. local time on a Tuesday that financial markets will not forget. A coalition naval force announced a transit corridor protection operation, essentially a military escort system for commercial vessels attempting to cross the strait. Within hours, the insurance markets didn't stabilize, they froze. Because the playbook doesn't respond to guns, it responds to uncertainty. While destroyers and frigates moved into position, Iran's response was not to engage them directly, it was to call radio checks on 12 vessels simultaneously, to conduct a slow-moving inspection of a Panamanian-flagged chemical tanker in the precise center of the inbound lane, and to release a statement through back-channel media citing 17 separate legal justifications for each action. Every action was legal on its face. Every action was intolerable in its effect. The lesson, the one that took Washington analysts like Dr. Miller 3 years and 6 war games to internalize, is that military power and strategic leverage are not the same thing. You can have the biggest guns in the ocean. If the other side holds the keys to the door, the guns are theater.
Dr. Angela Santos has spent 9 years staring at heat-adapted coral under conditions that most marine biologists won't enter without a second safety diver. She told us something in the decompression chamber after a dive that stopped the conversation. The reef doesn't know it's surviving. It's just doing what works. The reefs of Hormuz don't strategize. The mangroves of Keshm don't negotiate. The wind towers of Laft don't deliberate. They are mechanisms. perfected by pressure over timescales that make human geopolitics look like an afternoon argument, and they will outlast every government that has ever claimed sovereignty over the water above them, as long as we don't contaminate the one system they cannot adapt to, the accelerated chemistry of an oil spill that coats the shallow seabed in a layer of asphalt and ends 10,000 years of biological calibration in a single afternoon. Survival is not a metaphor here. It is a mechanism, and mechanisms, unlike ideologies, can be broken. The difference between a living reef and a dead one is sometimes measured in a single bad transit. As the ceasefire clock ticked down and shipping traffic slowly, cautiously resumed, the question in every energy capital on Earth was no longer if the Strait will be used as a weapon. That question was settled. The question now is whether the Hormuz Playbook, selective, systemic, legally ambiguous, asymmetrically cheap, becomes the permanent operating model of the world's most critical waterway. Iranian officials signaled through intermediaries that they have no interest in closure. Closure is a crisis. A crisis invites a coalition response. What they want is something far more durable: formalized conditionality, passage as a privilege to be managed, not a right to be assumed. If that model succeeds, if the Strait becomes the world's first formally selective commercial choke point, it will not remain a regional arrangement for long. Dr. Miller pulled up a world map in that war room and highlighted 5 other choke points in red: Malacca, Suez, Bab el-Mandeb, the Turkish Straits, and the Taiwan Strait. Hormuz, he said quietly, is the proof of concept. The world's most important 21 miles just became the world's most dangerous template. The moving vessel Northern Star clears the last waypoint. Captain Mateo Reyes doesn't celebrate. He doesn't exhale dramatically. He sets the new course on autopilot, pours himself a black coffee, and walks to the starboard bridge wing. The red mountains of Hormuz Island are still visible in the early morning light. Impossible geology, alien colors, the same rock formation that has watched every empire pass through and watched every empire leave. Captain Mateo has been crossing this strait for 20 years. He has crossed it under 3 different flag states, 3 different insurance regimes, and now, for the first time, under a toll system that no law formally acknowledges. He told us, "The ocean doesn't care about your politics, but it remembers everything you do to it." The Strait of Hormuz is where geography becomes destiny, where the Earth's own minerals become food, and where 21 miles of water holds the architecture of the modern world in the palm of its hand. If you want to understand how the world survives the next century, don't look at the capitals, don't look at the summits, look at the Strait. And if you want to see the replica method, the strategy other nations are already using to build redundancy around this geological choke point, comment the word playbook below. The next video shows exactly how it works.